The adopted girl picks a fight with the truly doted-on heiress.
She paused for a moment. If I were truly foolish enough to steal a necklace, would I be stupid enough to drop it into a bag that everyone can see? An older gentleman standing nearby coughed into his hand. It made sense. Mrs. Thorne, still trying to salvage the situation, countered, "Perhaps you thought the most public place would be the safest hiding spot." Elara nodded slowly. "You really watch too many movies, don't you?" A wave of stifled laughter rippled through the hall. Her face flushed red. Mrs. Thorne was about to argue when Caleb Vance spoke up. "Secretary Harrison." "Yes, Mr. Vance." "Open the surveillance footage for the second-floor hallway and the side lounge." His voice wasn't loud, but no one dared to interrupt. Seraphina Lamb flinched, her hands clutching her dress so tightly her knuckles turned white. Watching that reaction, Elara understood 80% of the truth. It was only when the butler connected the security feed to the large screen in the drawing room that she slowly continued. "I have one more small question. Mrs. Thorne, you said I was the last person to pass you, but from the time I came down the stairs to the time you cried out about your missing jewelry, less than 3 minutes had passed. In such a short time, you managed to identify me as the suspect, faster than a GPS system. I'm quite touched." Scattered laughter broke out and then spread. Mrs. Thorne turned pale. Just then, the cameras came to life. The first frame showed the second-floor hallway. Everyone saw that after Mrs. Preston left the dressing room, Seraphina stood at the door talking to Elara for a few minutes. There was no sound, but their expressions were enough to tell everyone the atmosphere was anything but friendly. Afterward, Seraphina left. That wasn't enough to convict anyone, but the next image made the entire hall gasp. A girl in a server's uniform wearing a mask, her head bowed low. She looked around and then quickly slipped into Elara's dressing room when no one was there. Less than 15 seconds later, she stepped out. Though the mask covered half her face, the silver bracelet on her left wrist was extremely eye-catching. Elara tilted her head, looking past Seraphina. "That bracelet looks very familiar." Every eye in the room simultaneously focused on the assistant standing behind Seraphina. The girl turned ghost white, her reflex being to hide her wrist behind her back. It was over. That single movement was enough for everyone to understand. Seraphina spoke up frantically. "No, you can't conclude anything just because of a bracelet. Maybe it was a coincidence." "A coincidence?" Elara laughed coldly. "Miss Lamb, your coincidences are applied thicker than your mascara." Mrs. Vance's voice turned icy. "Miss Lamb, explain yourself." Seraphina's lips trembled. I don't know anything about this." The assistant behind her finally cracked under the pressure. Her legs gave way, and she sank to the floor. "Miss Lamb told me to do it. I didn't mean to." She sobbed, saying she only wanted to make Miss Preston lose face a little. A collective gasp erupted in the hall. Mrs. Thorne felt as though she'd been struck by lightning. "What? You took my necklace?" The assistant wailed hysterically. It was Miss Lamb. "She told me to temporarily take your necklace and slip it into Miss Preston's bag, then find a way to take it back out so everyone would think she was a thief but hadn't actually committed a crime. She said we weren't going to make it a big deal." Elara watched her for a few seconds and then suddenly laughed. "Not a big deal?" She turned to Seraphina. "Miss Lamb, you framed me as a thief in the middle of a party at my own home, in front of the elders of both our families and all these guests. And you call that not a big deal? Your definition of mild must be drowning me entirely." Seraphina could no longer deny it. Tears immediately began to fall. "I was just so jealous. I couldn't stand the way Caleb was always looking at you." Hearing this, the guests felt even more embarrassed for her, to be so jealous as to frame someone. It was like personally flushing one's own character down the drain. Julian Thorne, standing nearby, was utterly stunned. He looked at Seraphina as if she were a total stranger. "You lied to me." Seraphina turned to grab his hand. "Julian, I was just so scared. I was afraid he liked her. I was afraid everyone would only look at Elara Preston." Hearing this, Elara finally lost interest. "You're wrong." She set her handbag down, her voice not loud but incredibly clear. "People don't look at me because I'm an heiress. They look at me because I don't need to tear anyone else down to make myself stand out." A profound silence fell over the hall. Caleb looked at her, the depth of his gaze intensifying. Elara walked towards Seraphina, step by step, neither fast nor slow. "Do you know what the funniest thing is?" She stopped in front of her, her gaze tranquil. You always thought I won because of my status, because of the Preston family, or because I had people backing me up. But in reality, from beginning to end, the thing that made you lose was yourself. A person who only knows how to use tears, jealousy, and schemes will eventually be drowned by those very things. Seraphina's face was white, drenched in tears. Mrs. Thorne, both humiliated and furious, looked like she was about to slap her. Mrs. Vance, her face completely cold, turned to her husband and said, "The Lamb family certainly knows how to raise a daughter." That sentence was light, but it was enough to sink the Lamb family's social standing by half. Suddenly, another female voice cut in. "Wait!" Everyone turned. Stepping out from a shadow was Gemma Preston, the daughter of the Preston second branch and Alara's cousin. She had been sitting out the whole night acting uninvolved, but now she couldn't help herself. This might not have been done by Miss Lamb alone. Alara narrowed her eyes slightly. "Finally showing your face." Gemma bit her lip as if having an internal struggle, then said, "I accidentally heard Miss Lamb on the phone before the party. It seems she mentioned that if Alara Preston lost face in front of the Vances, the one who would benefit most wouldn't be an outsider." The atmosphere surged again. Mr. Preston asked coldly, "Gemma, what are you trying to say?" Gemma shivered but pushed on. "I just think Uncle should check the guest list again. The event manager who brought Miss Lamb in was recommended by the second branch." A knife plunged straight into her own branch. Before anyone could process this, Alara laughed. The smile was beautiful, but it sent a chill down Gemma's spine. "Dear cousin," Alara said softly, "you think you're so clever, don't you?" Gemma stiffened. Alara turned to her father. "Dad, she was half right. The event manager was recommended by the second branch, but the person who actually added Seraphina Lamb to the inner guest list wasn't the manager. It was her." Gemma's eyes widened. "You're lying." "Am I?" Alara tilted her head, her voice dangerously soft. "We can just ask the reception staff. Oh, and I remember you came to my school last week to tell me I must come home for this party because there would be a very fun show. At the time, I thought you had changed for the better. Turns out you were just preparing the entertainment." Gemma's face turned from white to green. Mr. Preston looked at his niece with icy eyes. Mrs. Preston sneered. "I did wonder why the second branch was so enthusiastic about party planning." Alara let out a very faint sigh. "Cousin, I truly don't understand. If you want power in the family, or to impress our elders, or to get a foot in the company, why can't you do it honestly? Why do you always choose the cheapest way? Or is it because you know that without these backstabbing games, you have nothing over me?" It was like a slap to Gemma's face. Her eyes turned red, and she finally lost control. "So what if I did? From the time we were kids, you were always the chosen one. Grandpa likes you, Uncle and Aunt spoil you, and now even the Vances are looking at you. What about me? I'm a Preston granddaughter too. Does anyone truly value me?" As the words slipped out, the hall went silent. Mrs. Vance frowned. Mr. Preston gave a cold laugh. "Is it that no one values you, or that you've never done anything worthy of being valued?" Gemma stood paralyzed. Alara looked at her, feeling only a sense of the absurd. There are some people who always think others have everything because of luck, forgetting that they themselves never actually tried to be worthy of anything. In the end, the second branch was asked to leave the party that very night by Mr. Preston. Seraphina and the Thorne family were completely humiliated and escorted out under the scornful gazes of the guests. Before leaving, Seraphina looked back at Alara, her voice choked. "You won." Alara stood under the crystal chandelier, her figure slender yet proud. She simply smiled. "No, you lost the moment you chose to be the villain while trying to play the victim." After that party, the name Alara Preston completely rose to prominence in the high society of Viridian Falls. It wasn't because of her status, but because in one night she had exposed a mean girl, overturned a frame-up, and casually swept the second branch off the chessboard. The school forums exploded, especially when someone caught a video of Alara at the party saying, "No evidence is as terrifying as a head that likes to imagine things." That line immediately became a viral sensation. Maya Reed read the comments until her stomach hurt from laughing. "Bestie, you've officially become the goddess of roasts. I suspect in a few years, They'll be teaching students how to counterattack using your classic statements. Alara, sitting in the library reading a financial report, only looked up. I just wanted to study in peace, but life keeps forcing you to be the protagonist. Before Alara could reply, a figure stopped in front of her table. Julian Thorne. Maya glared at him so hard she could have turned him into juice. Alara was much calmer. She closed her laptop and looked at him. Something wrong? Julian stood still for a long time before whispering, I'm sorry. Alara didn't answer. He gave a bitter smile. Before, I misunderstood you. I thought you were trying to get close to me, trying to get my attention. Turns out the person worth laughing at was me. Alara looked at him, her expression unchanged. Are you apologizing because you misunderstood me, or because you just found out who I am? The question was so direct, Julian choked. That was the very thing he didn't dare face. If Alara Preston had been just an ordinary girl, would he have come to apologize? Or would he still be standing by Serafina, thinking she was too sharp, thinking she was just a girl who liked to cause trouble? His silence was his answer. Alara gave a very faint smile. See, some people aren't annoying because they were once wrong. They're annoying because they only wake up when they realize the other person isn't below them. Julian's face flushed as he clenched his hands. I truly regret it. Then keep that regret and grow up. Alara pushed her books aside, her voice steady. Your apology is late, and I usually don't accept late deliveries. She stood up, and as she turned, she saw Caleb Vance standing at the end of the bookshelf. He was wearing a light gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, standing in the middle of a university library yet still carrying the aura of a man who had just stepped out of a billion-dollar boardroom. Several girls nearby were pretending to read while their eyes were glued to him. Maya's eyes went wide. Mr. Vance came all the way to the school? Before Alara could speak, Caleb walked over and naturally took the stack of books from her hand. Done? She looked up at him. Aren't you busy? So busy you have time to pick up your future girlfriend? Maya nearly fainted. Julian stood like a statue. Alara glared at him, but her earlobes had turned visibly red. What nonsense are you talking about? Caleb looked at her, the corner of his mouth curving. Isn't it the future? Alara was so teased she didn't know how to respond and could only turn her face away to hide her soaring heart rate. She suddenly understood. This was the most painful kind of slap in the face. No need to argue with the ex. Just having the man they couldn't reach standing beside her as she walked calmly away was enough. 3 months later, the second branch was investigated for secretly siphoning profits from a Preston family project. The Lamb family also lost a major contract due to the scandal at the party. Serafina Lamb transferred schools quietly, and Julian Thorne nearly vanished from his old circle of friends. Alara officially began participating in the investment department of her family's conglomerate at her grandfather's suggestion. Initially, many thought she was just an heiress doing an internship for show, but in less than 2 months, she personally identified a loophole in a partnership proposal, saving the company from a significant loss. At a meeting that day, a veteran director blurted out, "Truly Mr. Preston's daughter. Not just a pretty vase." Alara just laughed. I planned on being a pretty vase, but life didn't let me. The room erupted in laughter. Caleb Vance, sitting opposite her, twirled a pen lightly, his eyes full of amusement. After the meeting, he walked with her to the parking lot. The sunset hit the glass buildings, dyeing the ground in soft orange and gold. Alara carried her briefcase beside him and suddenly sighed. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I'm thinking if I hadn't been framed that day and forced to reveal my identity, I'd probably still be a peaceful student right now." Caleb slowed his pace. "Do you regret it?" Alara was silent for a few seconds, then shook her head. "No, just sometimes. It's tiring. Ever since I became the Alara Preston, people always look at me through a different lens. Some flatter me, some are jealous, some regret having looked down on me." She bowed her head with a faint smile. "Sometimes I don't know if they're looking at me or my status." Caleb stopped completely. The evening breeze blew, making a few strands of hair flutter by her ear. He reached out to tuck the hair back, a movement that was rare in its slowness and gentleness. "Then let me tell you something." "What?" "The first time I noticed you wasn't at the party." Alara was surprised. "It wasn't? It was at a financial seminar at your school 8 months ago." He looked at her, his voice deep. A girl in the back row stood up and challenged the professor, saying the valuation model he presented was too pretty for the real world. Then she said something. Elara blinked, remembering. That day she had said, "The market isn't a fairy tale. It won't spare you just because you're kind." Caleb smirked. "I remember that." Her heart shivered. "You were there?" "Yes." He looked at her. "At the time I thought, whose daughter is this with such a sharp tongue?" Elara laughed. "So you liked me before I even knew you?" "Yes. And I was playing it cool." Elara crossed her arms. "Observing what?" "Observing if you were worth pursuing seriously." She looked up at him, her gaze softening. "And the result?" Caleb leaned down, the distance between them just a breath away. "The result is, you made me see that everyone was wrong about me and about you." "Yes?" Her voice dropped. "They said I didn't know how to like anyone." Before Elara could react, he kissed her. The first kiss wasn't overly intense or hurried. It was like everything that had been suppressed until now had finally found a reason to be honest. Warm, slow, and very real. When he pulled away, her ears were completely red. Caleb, seeing this, gave a rare, clear laugh. "You're blushing." Elara immediately counterattacked. Who wouldn't blush after being kissed? "You're truly annoying." She glared at her, but still couldn't help but laugh. From that day on, their being together became an open secret. Outsiders didn't dare ask directly, but those involved were so pampered they didn't need to ask to see it. Caleb Vance, famous for being cold as ice, now had his eyes automatically find Elara Preston at every party or meeting they attended. He remembered what food she liked, who she disliked, and avoided them first. And he knew she was tired if she even slightly furrowed her brow. Maya Reed, watching them sit across from each other in a coffee shop one fine day, finally exclaimed, "I believe it now. There really is a type of CEO who is cold to the world but voluntarily acts as a private chauffeur for his girlfriend." Elara nearly choked on her tea. Caleb remained very calm. "Is it voluntarily?" "It's an honor." Maya clutched her heart and slumped into her chair. "I officially resign from the world of people with lovers." 1 year later, Elara Preston graduated with honors. At the graduation ceremony, wearing her cap and gown and holding a large bouquet, she stood in the bright early summer sun. Caleb Vance appeared immediately after the ceremony ended, amidst a forest of curious gazes from the entire student body. Someone recognized him and whispered, "Oh my God, Mr. Vance. Who is he here to pick up?" Then, in front of everyone, he walked straight to Elara, took the graduation cap from her hand, leaned down to adjust the tassel that was askew, and handed her a small velvet box. Elara was stunned. "What's this?" "A graduation gift." She opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a gaudy diamond like in an idol drama, but a very sleek design with a clear, sharp stone sparkling in the sun. Her heart immediately raced. Caleb looked at her, his gaze softening. "The first time we met, you dropped an expensive watch." "Yes. This time, I'm voluntarily giving you something even more expensive." The students watching from afar nearly exploded. Elara looked at him, her eyes reddening. "Are you really proposing to me at the school gates?" "Yes," he said with an annoying level of composure. "So that from now on, no one has to ask how far along I am in pursuing you." "Caleb Vance, you truly are." She choked back a laugh, tears falling. "You really know how to pick a spot to make me lose my cool." He gently squeezed her hand. "So, the answer is?" Elara looked at the man in front of her, the man who had once made high society believe he couldn't love anyone. The man who had stood in the middle of a party filled with daggers and asked her 3 words. "Are you all right?" The man who never forced her to be weak to be protected, but always let her be herself. Sharp, smart, brilliant, and still chose to stand by her. She smiled, tears sparkling. "I do." Cheers erupted across the campus. Some clapped, some filmed. Maya Reed, not far away, was both crying and screaming, "Finally, my protagonist has a worthy male lead." Caleb placed the ring on her finger, and then, under the summer sun and the roar of the crowd, he leaned down to kiss her again. Elara suddenly thought, life really does know how to write a script. It had thrown mean girls, frame-ups, misunderstandings, jealousy, and power struggles at her, traps that seemed like endless nuisances. But it was because of those that she could see clearly who was worthy of standing beside her. The wedding of Elara Preston and Caleb Vance took place that autumn. It wasn't overly flashy, but it was so beautiful that anyone present had to admit it was the union of 2 people born of the same world who chose to love each other, not because of their family status, but because they truly saw each other. On the wedding day, Maya read as the bridesmaid cried until her mascara was ruined. Looking back, I feel like Serafina Lamb actually did us a favor. Alara, adjusting her veil, nearly ruined her makeup laughing. What favor? If she hadn't caused such a mess, how could your love story have progressed so fast?
Ilara laughed. True.
The door opened. Caleb Vance stood outside in a black groom's tuxedo, looking so handsome it made one want to ask if God was being too biased. He looked at her in her wedding dress, his eyes showing a rare, beautiful spark of emotion. Maya, sensing the moment, vanished instantly, leaving the two of them alone. Ilara looked at him through the mirror, her lips curling. Mr. Vance, are you nervous today? Yes. I thought you didn't know the meaning of tension. He stepped up behind her, leaning down to kiss her hair. I'm only not tense in front of things that aren't important. She turned to look at him, her eyes full of smiles. So I'm very important today? Caleb raised an eyebrow. Aren't you? You're the most important. Alara looked at him and finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. She suddenly understood. The best kind of love is never the kind that makes you doubt yourself, or calculate, or act, or struggle. The best love is when you are strong enough to protect yourself, yet you still meet someone who doesn't use that as an excuse to leave you to it. That person will see your sharpness as light, not a thorn. They will love you even when you aren't as gentle and obedient as people expect. They will stand beside you not to save you, but to tell the world that you are already great, and they are simply the lucky person who gets to be with you. As she took her father's arm and stepped into the aisle, Alara saw many faces. Her parents were teary-eyed but smiling broadly. Her grandfather in the front row nodded with deep satisfaction. Maya Reed was clutching tissues, crying a river. And at the end of the white floral path was Caleb Vance waiting for her. Still that same presence, still that same gaze. But this time, his eyes held no restraint, only a gentleness so clear he didn't need to hide it anymore. Alara suddenly remembered the day she was blocked at the library gates, suspected and framed for all sorts of things. If anyone had told her then that the man at the end of all that drama would become her husband, she would have told them to stop watching movies. And yet, here it was. Life truly is more dramatic than fiction. The only difference is that a good story always has a worthy ending. When she placed her hand in his, Caleb squeezed it. Very tight, very sure. Then he leaned down and whispered only for her to hear. From now on, Mrs. Vance, what if someone messes with you again? Alara raised an eyebrow, her lips curling with pride. Then they're just unlucky. He chuckled. Yes, just unlucky. Outside, the autumn sun was beautiful, and the wedding bells rang out clearly. And the story that began with a mistaken cheating confrontation, a broken watch, and a mean girl who loved to act, finally closed with an ending so beautiful, it made everyone who had once looked down on Alara Preston understand one thing. A true heiress doesn't need to announce who she is, because when she stands there, everything fake around her naturally reveals its true form. And the man who truly loves her will never let her walk through the storm alone.